Hey all, Bree from the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I have got a gift for you this holiday season. If you love the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I mean love the No Guilt Mom podcast, then tell us about it. Leave us a review, and you can be entered to win a No Guilt Mom gift card. All you have to do is leave a review, take a screenshot, and then simply go to noguiltmom.com/review to enter our giveaway for a free No Guilt Mom gift card, simply for telling us what you think about the podcast. It is amazing. But don't delay. Get right on this, as we're going to be giving away that No Guilt Mom gift card on December 21st. So get right on over and visit noguiltmom.com/review.
Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I am your host, Joanne Crone, here with my co-host, the purple-haired Bree Tucker.
Right. Hello, everybody. How are you? It's purple
Fuchsia.
and teal.
I always have something to talk about because I could just go to the color of your hair. Like anytime I am out of words, I'm like, what color is Bree's hair today?
It is colorful. And it's so funny because I just find it funny how I finally have embraced this, because you've known me for so many years.
Yeah.
I have been wanting to have like rainbow color. I actually want rainbow colored hair, but I don't have the guts yet. This is a giant step forward from what you used to know, because I've been wanting to have colored hair like this since 2010. So
yeah. Well, you've been in like jobs that don't allow that. Now that you work for No Guilt Mom, you get to express your individuality.
Yes, very much so. I think but isn't it kind of weird nowadays for almost any place to be no to unnatural hair color?
I don't know. I think it's still very much a part of it. Like teachers are held to like those standards, as well as like banking professionals or anyone like with a forward facing customer. Engineers, it would be looked down on in the office. Like I think
and that's what
it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not rules, but it's those societal expectations of like what's appropriate behavior.
And that's what I guess I'm getting at. It makes it so that if you see somebody with like all bright green hair, you're like, oh, they're not very professional. They're probably not very good at XYZ other than being a hairdresser or an artist. And it's like, really? I don't know. That's my own personal judgment in my head of what I think other people are thinking. So
it's a bias. Yeah, it's a bias. I would say like you rock that hair like no one else. I say everyone who I'm around who meets you, like the first time they meet you, they're like, I love your hair, Bree.
It's very different.
That's always what happens.
And it's funny. It's very different. And we talked about that on today's podcast a little bit. I've always been different, and I have learned to embrace it. And once I learned to embrace it, I felt like that kind of gave me like a little bit of a superpower.
Yeah. I think the whole embracing differences, which was I think we need like a ding, ding, ding. Armchair Expert has a ding, ding, ding thing,
ding,
but
ding,
I think you nailed that segue on the nose. So it's like Segway Award or something like that.
Wait, we need to make a Segway Award. Can we make it like a little statue with a person on a Segway?
Segway. Wrong Segway.
Oh, come on. It's a play on words.
It's the Segu Award. I always want to pronounce Segway. Segu Award. That's how I remember how to spell it. But today we have Monica Berg. And Monica Berg is an international speaker. She's a spiritual thought leader, and she's the author of Fear is Not an Option, Rethink Love, and her newest book we're talking about today, The Gift of Being Different. And she's also the host of the Spiritually Hungry podcast. She's a self-proclaimed change junkie, which I bring up immediately with her in this episode. And she shows individuals how to create a life that not only feels like it's working, but most importantly, a life in which they're living and loving as the powerful, fulfilled person that they've always wanted to be. And I hope you enjoy our interview with Monica. You want mom life to be easier. That's our goal too. Our mission is to raise more self-sufficient and independent kids, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to help you delegate and step back. Each episode will tackle strategies for positive discipline, making our kids more responsible and making our lives better in the process. Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. Hey, Monica, it is great to have you here. In all of like my reading of you, every place I read about you, you describe yourself as a change junkie. And I bring this up because Brie is famous for "Don't move my cheese, Brie."
Very
That's
much
what
so.
she says all the time. So I want to know about you being a change junkie first.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a friend that I work out with, and she's like, I'm a same junkie. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm not interested in change. Well, it's interesting because my nature is not that way. I don't think anybody really loves change, especially change that feels forced. I had an epiphany many years ago. Well, first, I discovered that the more flexible I became, the happier I was. So the previous me was very much a perfectionist, very type A. I still love my daily planner. I love having goals and intentions and writing things down and plans, but I've also trained myself to be equal parts flexible. So if something doesn't happen or it gets changed, right away my brain is already thinking, okay, so that's not an option anymore. What is? And it's very liberating. Mm-hmm. And I think that the epiphany was, like everybody, when change that wasn't expected, which is where we're naive because we're always changing in small ways every single day, but we don't look at life like that, right? And then we suddenly notice this big change that we're not comfortable with. We're thinking, how did I end up here? How did I get here? How did this happen? Mm-hmm. So I started to think about, okay, well, if I know change happens, I'm responsible to direct my change and to choose how I want to change. And I really started to live in that way, and I became addicted to it.
That's so interesting. Was there like one moment in your life which like made you realize that you have to change your thinking regarding change?
Yeah, I think that I chose a life. My husband and I are very much on a spiritual path. We have been since we were young, and we run a big organization, and you cannot do that successfully from a place of control. And I think also, I had an eating disorder when I was 17. This idea of control was a theme for me my whole life. And the more that I tried to control things, again, more unhappy that I was. And also I wasn't getting the results I wanted. So I think it was just a series of big things happening that were so out of my control that forced me to really rethink, coupled with I really knew what kind of life I wanted to create for myself. And also that couldn't come from control.
I think that's such an important message for moms because especially in this realm of parenting, we look at a lot of things about control. Like, how can we control the situation? How can we control it so that everyone's happy? How can we control it so it goes smoothly? And like, I see you nodding your head and you're like, no, you can't do it that way.
Well, I have 4 kids in very different ages. My second child was born with Down syndrome. And I found out a few hours after he was born. And I had so many different feelings, so many mixed feelings, but I had never felt so out of control. And that was after recovering from anorexia. That was after already I had set myself up to be able to handle a lot of different things and had a better relationship with myself and loved myself. But I could not change his diagnosis. I could not control my way through it. In fact, the day that he was born, they told me all the things that he'd never be, actually, a list of things he'd never become.
That's
and
hard.
I had a choice. Yeah, it was actually the second day he was born because we were so young, my husband and I too, and the doctors thought we were foolish and not really understanding what they were saying. So the pediatrician brought in 7 other doctors and sat us in a room and had a talking to with us. And I got up out of that room and I said, you don't know what you're talking about. So I made a choice that day that I had a lifetime to discover all the gifts that he would have and what he would be able to do. And I stopped listening to anything in that way. And that was like, the most liberating thing. I completely became free and like just open to the possibility of who he could become and who I would become by being his mother. And it was a beautiful journey. And I'm not saying everybody has to go through such a difficulty, but usually it's the challenges that really kind of wake us up, right?
I love you.
Yeah,
You took that poem, A Trip to Holland, to heart.
It is always the challenges that force us to change. And what I find amazing about your story is that you had that immediate reaction when they were telling you in the hospital about what your son couldn't do, because I think that many people in that situation would have like been overcome with despair and listened to the doctors and taking it all in. And it's so cool that you switched it around like that. I'm curious, like, do you think there was like something that in your personality that made you switch it around like that, since it was such kind of a different way to see things?
Yeah, I think that as a child, I always had the belief system that I didn't believe life was meant to be a life of suffering. So, and even though when I went through difficulties, I didn't hold myself in high regard when I had the eating disorder, but I understood that, right? And I knew that I had to get to a place where I didn't suffer and I didn't live that way. So then when I had Josh, I knew again that he's not meant to suffer, certainly. I don't believe that life is cruel. I don't believe that God is cruel. I believe that he has a life of purpose and meaning. And I believe that he is my son for a reason. So I had a lot of things I knew I believed, right? There was a lot of unknown. And for sure, I was anxious and I was afraid at first. But I knew that there was something great to discover in him and in mothering him. So I just wouldn't accept that. And more than that, when he had all this kind of therapy, he had so many different therapists, 5 different therapies a week. And, each one, he can't do this, or you shouldn't give him solid foods ever because he can't really chew, his low muscle tone, his tongue, he's unable. And I just said, I don't want to hear anything negative actually about Josh at all. If there's something that's dangerous for him, then you can inform me. But if not, I'm raising him like my other children. And I did. And he hit every milestone. And they're like, we don't understand it. He shouldn't be able to eat this. How did you get him to eat that? And I was like, well, he's able. I mean, so I just didn't buy into it. And I think, again, that exercise, right? That whole training really set me up for my life, but also how I wanted to impact other people's lives.
My son is playing a game right now on his computer where he's a thief and the cops are after him. So I'm so excited about this new app, Give As We Grow, where instead of being the quote unquote bad guys, kids are practicing giving back.
That is so cool, Joanne. I really wish that there was something like this when my kids were younger that got them excited about giving back to others and helped them build a better understanding of what it really means to volunteer.
Give As We Grow is the first of its kind free educational mobile app for children ages 8 to 11 that teaches kids via fun, service-focused minigame quests to tap into their unique talents and interests to help others.
And did you know that studies show that there is a biological connection between generosity and happiness, and that volunteering improves people's physical and mental health? I mean, kids who volunteer typically do better in school and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. And that is something that I think we all want for our kids.
Ready to spark a new movement in generosity? Find and download Give As We Grow for free in the App Store for Android and iOS. And for resources for the whole family, visit giveaswegrow.org.
Hey, all, Bree here, and I wanted to share one of my favorite gifts to give during the holiday season, a Storyworth book. It is the most amazing gift ever. Storyworth is an online service that lets you create a special and unique gift of someone's story. I've given Storyworth books to both of my parents, and it has been their favorite gift, hands down. And did I mention it is so easy? Storyworth emailed my parents questions every week that I handpicked from their massive list of questions that they have. All my parents had to do was open their email and answer them. That easy. I asked my dad questions like, did you have any rules that you set for yourself as a parent, which you immediately broke? And he did. I even asked both of my parents, are you more like your mom or your dad? And they shared a lot of really amazing qualities that I didn't know about my grandparents at the time. Then at the end of the year, Storyworth compiles all of their answers, puts them into this gorgeous book that covers everything. My parents love showing us their books, and I personally love getting a chance to read them. With Storyworth, I am giving those I love a thoughtful and personal gift from the heart that preserves their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/NGM and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/NGM to save $10 on your first purchase.
That's incredible. And it really leads us into the book that you just wrote about the gift of being different with your daughter. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yes. So my youngest, Abigail, was diagnosed with dyslexia. And again, I think if we look back, and honestly, for your listeners, I think such a fundamental, important understanding for people to have is that if you look at the totality of your life and you look at every hardship that's happened and everything that you have gone through and you've gotten to the other side, ask yourself how you've been changed by that. Was it a positive way or was it a negative way? Because for sure you've been changed. And if you don't like how you've been changed, you can actually rethink that and change your feelings about it now and have a different mentality. So with Josh, he helped me understand so many things that by the time Abigail was diagnosed, I was like, okay, we've got this. This is not a big deal. We have information about her, and now we can choose how we want to respond to it. At least we know what it is. So I remember, in first grade, usually dyslexia is kind of discovered first, second grade. she was able to answer questions that other kids her age couldn't. Her critical thinking was off the charts, but she was struggling with putting sentences together and spelling and reading. And then by second grade, it was really obvious. And the teachers at first didn't know what she had because, again, in so many levels, she was excelling, but in the basics, she was falling behind. So when we got her tested, we knew she had dyslexia. I thought to myself, how do I want to bring this to her attention? So I didn't tell her right away. I did my research. I got a book about dyslexia. I really wanted to understand how her brain worked. And then she beat me to the punch. She came to me one day. It was like a week or two after the diagnosis. My mother-in-law was on her deathbed. So I was really overwhelmed by a lot of other things, but she came to me and it's like one of those moments, like I just got out of the shower. I'm rushing to go to dinner. She's brushing her teeth, trying to get her to bed before I leave. And she's looking in the mirror and she looks at me through the mirror and she said, Mommy, do I need so much help in school because I'm stupid? And I was like, there is no way my child's going to live their life thinking that about themselves. And I was so grateful that she felt confident and safe enough to share that with me. Because I remember thinking things about myself as a child that I would never share with my mom. You know, my mom was great, but it didn't feel like a safe space for me in that way. So we sat on the bed and we had this whole conversation. I told her diagnosis. And then I told her that it can be a gift and that it's a superpower, but I could see she didn't really believe me. So I pulled out that book I had been reading and I said, Abigail, tell me if this sounds like you. And I started reading these different characteristics of people who have dyslexia, how they learn, how they see the world. And her eyes started to light up. And she's like, yeah, that sounds like me. And then I started giving her examples of famous people, notable people who have dyslexia, like Albert Einstein, Steven Spielberg. And I started talking about
Tons
what they
creatives.
did. And she was like, really? And then she was like, really? Then she believed me. And I thought in that moment, and it said in the margin, I had written Abigail to a T. And she's like, what does that mean? I'm like, it's you. So in that moment, I saw how quickly we were able to reframe that for her. And that's kind of what gave birth to the book.
I love so much about it. And I want to take it back a little bit to the beginning when she was in school. And you describe in the book how, she's in the blue reading group. And of course, blue is her favorite color. But then she realizes that it's the quote unquote, like lower reading group. Right. And being a former teacher, like that hit me hard because I had the reading groups in my class too. And all the things that like we were told by the district of how we're supposed to treat each reading group and how we're supposed to work with each reading group. But I was wondering, like, how was your experience with the school during that time, and Abigail, before you got that diagnosis? Like, did they support you?
They did support her. I have to say, I really loved that school she went to. It was a dual curriculum. So there was a lot of movement in the classroom anyway. And there were many different levels, whether it was the secular study or the dual language curriculum. So I don't think at first she really noticed it. And she admitted this to me, by the way, after we wrote the book or the first draft. She didn't tell me this part right away, but she was sitting, I think it was like a school, like a test that the whole grade took, right? Like some state test. And after the first hour, everybody finished and she didn't. And they moved from the back of the room. And in the second hour, she's still struggling. By the third hour, now the kids are like way on something else. A boy that was sitting in the back of the room, like stared at her and looked at her in a way that she really felt dumb. Right. Oh, and then she realized that she was very different. So while the school supported it, the issue for me, and it's interesting because a lot of the feedback I've gotten from teachers and parents is that this book has really helped talk about bullying and how to help that, right? Because the issue is this, you can teach people to stand up to bullies and to understand their self-worth and speak up, but you need the whole class to stand up and help support that child. One child against a bully, we all know how that feels. It's really, really difficult. I mean, even adults bully people these days. Yeah. And, we all have had those experiences for different reasons and different ages. So it wasn't so much that the school didn't support. I just don't think there was a conversation with the children and in the classroom that needed to happen. And we actually went back to her school with our book. They invited us to do a reading to her grade. And I was so proud of her because think about like a full circle moment. I mean, not many of us get those. So she was able to go back as a fourth grader, as an author. And these kids were like in awe of her. She's signing their books, they're talking, they're asking questions. But what was interesting is the moms, actually, their children went home and spoke to them. And the moms, a bunch of them emailed me and they said, I don't know if you remember me, a lot of children left the third grade because of learning differences. And my daughter didn't know what a learning difference was. Nobody explained that. And now because of you and this book and Abigail explaining her story, she understands it and she has more empathy for that. And by the way, My daughter feels like she can talk about her superpower, which was like something with her stomach problems that she had. So it's that. I think that's what needs to happen more in homes and in classrooms.
Yeah, I think that talking about it as a superpower and what you can do does need to happen, because I know just from my experience that schools tend to look at the problems and try to fix the problems so that it's not a whole child learning experience, but rather like, okay, your child doesn't know how to pronounce like these phonemic patterns or whatever. Let's fix that versus like bringing the whole community in, like you described, and creating this culture of acceptance and this love of superpowers. And when I was reading your book, I noticed how Josh was in there and how his superpower is kindness. And I was like, first when I was reading it, I'm like, oh, it's so awesome. They have a great sibling relationship. I think like many parents have that like sibling, like, I don't know, anxiety or whatever. But just seeing kids having superpowers is something that I think more kids need. They need to know what they're good at versus what they're deficient at that they need to quote unquote fix.
But also where they feel deficient, to understand that that's an indication of where their superpower is really hidden. Because if you are able to understand the parts of yourself that make you feel different, then you can understand how to use that part of yourself. And then that can be your strength, right? So for dyslexia, for Abigail, how did that become her superpower? She realized that she learns with pictures instead of words. So she sees things. So now she feels confident actually to start writing stories herself or writing songs. She's starting to notice that because she has to work harder, she has perseverance, right? She's starting to see all of these as actually great positives. And the issue is that we try to fit children into some kind of cookie cutter version of learning instead of saying, well, of course we're all different. The three of us on this talk right now, we're all different. It's so silly for us to think that we all need to be the same. But again, that's the culture, right? We think that if people really see us as different, they're not going to want to talk to us. And that's very frightening as a child.
No, it is. So what's one thing that you wish like parents who do have kids with neurodiversities and learning differences, what do you want them to understand?
Well, the first thing is they have to sort out how they feel about it before they speak to their child, right?
True.
If they have fear around it, the child's going to pick that up. If they're afraid of it, they're also going to be afraid to probably do the research that they need to do to see that there are many, many options. So first, understand that everything's figure outable. You're getting information about your child. That's amazing. Then research every kind of option that there is, and then decide what's the best fit for your child and their needs. But talk about it. So many times I get letters from parents, and like one mother said, I have 3 kids that have 3 different learning differences. And they're older now that they realize that they're having extra help, they're having different services, but we've never talked about it. Should I? I said, by you not giving them voice to what they're feeling, of course they're feeling different. Of course they're noticing that they're different. By you not allowing that to be a conversation, it creates shame in the child. So I just think that it's really coming to this understanding that we are all different, some in very obvious ways, some in not, but nobody is the same. And most people are struggling in one way or another. Talk about it, discover it, find out what it is, and then make choices from there.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. It is so hard to raise kids who know how to manage money. Bree, right now, my kids are all about earning money for presents. My daughter wants to get presents for all of her friends, and my son is doing a Secret Santa with his friends.
Oh, I hear you. And if you're looking to raise kids that are financially responsible, we have got a lifesaver recommendation for you that you need to check out. It is Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families that gives kids and teens an easy and fun way to gain financial literacy, all while giving parents peace of mind.
You can send instant money transfers, automate allowance, and even keep an eye on kids' spending with real-time notifications. Meanwhile, your kids can begin their journey towards financial autonomy by learning how to save, invest, and spend wisely.
So sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/NGM.
That's greenlight.com/NGM to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/NGM. We're hitting that time of year where my brain gets so overloaded in December that I look for anything to make life easier. And I have to say, Brie, that Green Chef is one of those services.
Yes, Green Chef is there to take away the dreaded, oh my goodness, what are we going to eat for dinner tonight? You can eat clean all holiday long with over 80 weekly meal options each week, featuring things like quick and easy, protein-packed, calorie-smart, or my personal favorite, the keto options.
And you don't have to lose track of healthy eating habits during the holidays because every Green Chef customer gets a free session with one of their registered dietitians who can walk you through how to make clean eating work for you, which is very cool.
And I have to say that I have been loving their recipes lately. They put things together I have never thought of. This week, we're trying the lemon basil caper pork with sauteed cauliflower, bell peppers, almonds, and feta cheese, my favorite. Their recipes make it so easy to support my wellness goals without skipping on flavor.
For Green Chef's best deal of the year, get $250 off with code NGM250 at greenchef.com/NGM250. That's greenchef.com/NGM250. And don't forget to use that code NGM250 to get $250 off.
Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well.
I love that. And I think like when you mentioned the research, it's so important because if you are scared of it, of course you're not going to look for these books. And if you hadn't looked for the books on dyslexia, you wouldn't have been able to show your daughter that list of things that people with dyslexia do better than everyone else. I know that there is a lot of shame and there is a lot of pain around like having like a neurodiverse household. So I love that advice. And I know a lot of people in our No Guilt Mom community. I hope you take that advice and start your research and start talking about the things. What struggles do you hear other parents of kids with learning differences that like you wish other parents would understand? Like how should parents be raising their kids to treat other kids who have learning differences?
That's a great question. Our next children's book is we've written a series of 10. It's called The Tale of Being Different, the Tale of the Other Glove. That would not be a good title. The Tale of the Other Glove, and it's about unhoused people and the power of empathy, right? So, and it's interesting because when we've gone on this book tour, we've spoken to thousands of children who've gone to schools in different states. And I often ask them because they ask, are you writing another book? And I tell them, and then I ask them, do you know what empathy is? And it's astounding. Usually 3 kids out of a group of 50 raise their hand. 3, right? So I think the first thing is for them to talk to their children that, again, this is what we just said. Everybody's different. Some people's differences are more obvious. And sometimes we're frightened by what we see because we might think it's contagious, or we might think that if we talk to them, then other kids won't want us to talk to us. But to give them a view of what that child might be feeling and put them in that shoes. It starts in the house. It really comes down to kindness and compassion and empathy.
It does. And I know that like one more hurdle that people see is like this idea that you can't talk about it, that like it's somehow rude to bring something up or to go and like talk about differences or ask questions about differences. How do you recommend parents navigate that if like your child comes home and they're like, oh my gosh, like this person is in a lower reading group? Do you recommend like educating them about dyslexia? Do you like, how do we talk to our kids about this?
1,000%. I think that we can talk about, there's many different ways that children learn, and more teachers and educators and schools are understanding that. And they're offering different ways to teach children. And there's special schools that teach children different ways. And more these days, right? We're hearing about it, but I think it's to say it has nothing to do with ability, right? And I don't use the word disability. I call it a learning difference. I know schools like to call it a disability because that's how you get funding, but I'm not going to re-educate the world about what a disability is because it has a very negative connotation. We think a child is unable, right? So I think it's about just changing those kinds of stigmas, having those conversations, and to say that that child could be very, very, very bright, but they just don't learn in the same way that you do. And give the example of dyslexia and others.
But there are really good qualities about every child out there, for sure. I know we had a guest on a bit ago, and her child does have a disability. And she says that the word disability is actually fine to describe her child who is noticeably different. But taking away that negative connotation of disability, like it's just a disability in one area. But what you're saying is just empowering the abilities as much as the disabilities, like recognizing disabilities, talking about them,
like being different,
but also showing the good things about it.
Yeah, like being differently abled.
I mean, even, there's that famous drummer from, I think it was Def Leppard or Led Zeppelin band. I don't remember, but he was just coming to the height of his career and he was in a car accident. He was driving very fast, hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was wearing a seatbelt, but he got thrown in the windshield and it dismembered his arm. So imagine he's like the beginning of the height. They're just starting to take off. So you know what he did? He learned to play the drums with his feet and the one hand, and he is still with the band.
Yeah.
So my point is, does he technically have a disability? Yes. But he took that and he rewired his brain and learned how to play, and he's exceptional. So I really want part of the message of this book to be that whatever, again, is harder for you, whatever is your clear limitation, there's gold somewhere in there. You're going to learn different things about yourself. You're going to build strengths in other areas, and you can use that part of yourself to see things and do things that other people can.
100%. I think that's what we all want our kids to do, to see what they have that is special about them and to be able to grow that and to be proud of it and to like take on everything that is them and to be proud of all of that. That's a goal I always have for my kids.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I always point out to Abigail when I notice that she does something I haven't seen my other kids do. Like she was making Valentine's gifts for her grade, right? And they were all identical, but they had different things inside, but the outside package, they all look the same. And I said, Abigail, do you want to put a Post-it and write whose name is, we have to put the card on it. She's like, no, I know it. I'm like, you're sure you have 8 here? And she's like, yeah. And she goes, she names each one. And I was like, wait, do that again. She did it like an hour later. She still did that. Her memorization, right? Like she just has learned to learn in a different way. And it's amazing.
The brain rewires itself when it doesn't have one capability. It like strengthens others. And I find that endlessly fascinating. So you mentioned that your other book is coming up and you also have a Spanish edition launching of the current book, The Gift of Being Different. What else are you excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I love writing. I public speak a lot, but I've written 2 other books for adults. One is called Fear is Not an Option, and the other one's called Rethink Love. The second book is already at the Illustrator. We're working on the 3rd children's book, and I'm working on another nonfiction book.
That's awesome.
That is very exciting.
I'll plug that too. Why not? My husband and I have
plug away.
a podcast called Spiritually Hungry as well that we do weekly, if you want to check that out.
I was listening to one of your episodes this morning about your conversation about parent books and what they say. And I found that, and I have things to talk about after we get off.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I hear a follow-up coming.
Thank you so much, Monica, for joining us. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk more about these superpowers that we think like we have, because like all of us are different and all of us kind of push down aspects of ourselves that we think should not come out in public. And I know a lot of the aspects of myself that should not come out in public come out when I am drinking. Like,
what do you think? I'm trying to think I can't think of anything that I see when you have had a few too many margaritas along with me.
Well, it's not even a few too many. It's like half.
Okay.
Half. As soon as I like have like maybe half a drink, I'm like, oh, everything's coming out. We're going to talk about everything, which I kind of do anyways, but I think it's more to that. I'm thinking in example, like concrete terms. We had Margarita Monday on Monday, which is this like thing that I hosted in my neighborhood, really kind of not out of character, something I've been wanting to do for a while, but something I've been really afraid to do because there's all of this, no one will come. And
the fear of rejection.
The fear of rejection. And then what if like it's so awkward and nobody knows what to talk about and it's all on me, which I learned not a problem, but like surprisingly, no, but I just noticed like things that I would not normally share. I shared everything. I shared all the dirt I had on every single neighbor involved. And I'm like, I should not say those things, Joanne.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. I was like, maybe what she's talking about is that when you drink, you share more than you do with the average bear, but I'm not the average bear. No. You and I talk very freely about a lot of things that, So I'm all like, okay, because I feel like when you drink, it's just normal Joanne. Except for maybe you're slurred, but never as slurred as I am.
Not too bad.
I would say people are going to think that we're alcoholics. I swear we don't drink that much.
No, I am so not an alcoholic that it takes half. It takes half for me to get to this
yes,
stage.
that is very, you are like, I'm a lightweight. Like I drink one and I am done. And you're half of one. So yeah.
It's so funny because I think like we have this little like thing, like we had this bumper sticker and I don't have it on my car anymore, but it was like first pickup line or then wine.
Yep.
First car line, then wine. And like we talk about like, oh, like we're going to have a margarita by the pool. Honestly, like we're all talk. I drink maybe now because I really pay attention to what I eat and how much I take in once a week, maybe like one drink, because it's so calorie laden. And it's like, those are calories I could use elsewhere that would actually fill me up. So I've been making choices.
Yeah. I'll say mine is related to getting older. Like I recently saw a Holderness video. Shout out to Holderness family. I'm coming for you, Kim and Pin. We're going to get you one of these days on the podcast.
We're going to get you.
We're going to get you.
Please. You're going to have fun here. If anyone knows a Holderness family, they will have so much fun with us.
I know.
So much fun.
But they recently did a video, though this would have come out probably in April, where they were talking about how like welcoming the next generation, like the millennials to the Gen X club. And they're all like, you take a drink and it takes you 3 days to get off the hangover and all these other things. And I'm like, that's part of it. Like it's the calories and it's I have one drink and I feel it for like 3 days. It sucks. It's not fair. It's not fair.
Do you drink a lot of water when you're drinking?
You know how much water I drink. I drink a ton.
But do you specifically drink it while you're drinking the alcohol?
It depends. But I will tell you though, even when I do have some water, like I still have it, maybe not for 3 days, but I still have it for an extensively longer time than I ever have before. So it's, yeah. But I digress. I loved Monica, like going back to her guest, like I loved Monica. I loved her book and talking about how she focuses on the positive. Like when I worked in early intervention, which is like part of the federal early intervention program for kids with disabilities or developmental delays under the age of 3. That was the whole premise for how we did everything, was that your job was to look at what the positives were and build on those positives. But I know that's not how life always works.
It doesn't, because also in the schools, the focus on testing has really made it so that people are trying to bring up those scores. So they concentrate on the things needed to bring up the scores instead of the things that kids do really, really well. Yeah. So this book is so great. It's such a relatable way to talk to kids about dyslexia and about superpowers that relate to any sort of perceived disability or real diagnosed disability. The podcast episode that I was mentioning in the conversation, it was with Stephanie, and we'll have that podcast in the show notes for you so that you can hear just basically her interpretation of disability and how she likes that term is used. That's a great thought-provoking one as well. But until next time, remember, the best mom is a happy mom. Take care of you. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for stopping by.
Are you looking for something to listen to with your whole family? Then check out 6 Minutes, produced and created by Gen Z Media. With over 200 twisty, cliffhanger-filled episodes, 6 Minutes tells the story of 11-year-old Holiday, who is pulled from the icy waters with no memory of who she is or where she came from.
3 years ago, Brinley Pasternak helped the Anders family uncover the truth about Holiday's past. Now she'll need them to help her find the truth about hers. In 6 Minutes Out of Time, the long-awaited sequel, Cyrus Anders is found unconscious near the mysterious Elixir Academy in Florida, and Brinley learns the school may have a shocking connection to her missing mother.
Dive in now and get the most downloaded family audio adventure in history. Follow 6 Minutes wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen early and ad-free with the GZM family subscription.